going on, everybody? Thanks for watching and welcome to another video. Today I'm driving a 1993 Porsche 968 Coupe. Kind of a significant car in Porsche's history for a couple of reasons. One, it's the ultimate sort of evolution of the 924, 944 lineup that carried Porsche from the 70s through the 80s and into the early 90s with their entry-level models, basically. Originally, the platform was actually going to be a joint Volkswagen and Porsche project, but Volkswagen backed out, so Porsche took it over and ended up producing the 924 in the mid-70s, and that was powered by a 2-liter 4-cylinder Audi engine. The 924 was replaced by the 944 in 82 in Europe and 83 in the US, and the 944 went on through several versions. There was a 944S, there was a 944S2, 944 Cabriolet, 944 Turbo, so there was definitely several production variants of the 944. And then in 1992, they came out with the 968, which is what this is. And so this car was made from 92 until 1995. And so the other reason that it is a significant car in the history of Porsche is that it kind of bridges the transition from, two different eras, basically. So that being the 70s and 80s, where they had air-cooled 911s, and then they had water-cooled 4-cylinder entry-level cars. And then in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, the Boxster and 996 came out, and those shared a lot of parts. The Boxster was a 2-seat roadster, and the 996 was the first water-cooled 911 to come out. And so, the 968 is kind of the last of an era. And they didn't make that many of them. Actually, this is kind of a relatively rare car. They made, I want to say just under around 14,000 968s in total, and only around 4,600 of those came to the US. So the engine in the 968 is an evolution of the 3-liter that was in the 944 S2, which was the most powerful 944 that Porsche made. And that car had a 3-liter, so they took the same basic 3-liter for the 968, and they revised it pretty extensively. Changed the intake manifold, the internals are different, higher compression ratio, and then it has VarioCam, which is Porsche speak for variable valve timing. And the end result was basically 236 horsepower and about 225 foot-pounds of torque. Well, this car, again, it's a Tiptronic, so it's not as quick as a manual 6-speed 968, but a manual 968 was 0 to 60 in around 6 seconds, something like that. And the Tiptronic added almost an entire second, if not more, to the 0 to 60, so it was basically around 7 seconds. The main thing, I think, is the gearing. I mean, you're talking a 4-speed automatic versus the 6-speed, so you have 2 fewer gears, and that definitely impacts the acceleration. And then the other reason that the Tiptronic is slower is because of the weight. It added about 150 pounds to the car. But on the other hand, the Tiptronic makes the 968 even more of a dual-purpose machine. I mean, this car, for a daily driver, it would be really nice because you just get in and go. It doesn't matter if you're stuck in traffic. You don't have to worry about a clutch. And then on the freeway, you just, again, you just put it in drive and go. My personal choice would be to have a manual, but there's certainly nothing wrong with having a Tiptronic-equipped 968 if you're looking for a classic Porsche that you can daily drive and use it for a lot of different things. For the money, you can get these for anywhere from, you can get a really high mile 968, even a manual, probably for around 10 grand if you shop around enough. The nicer ones are definitely getting up into the high teens and the 20s, and even the high 20s, like a really nice low mile 6-speed, or even a Tiptronic equipped car. I've noticed that they're going for good money as well. But definitely for classic Porsche ownership, a car that you can drive all the time, every day, you can have this as your only car and it'll be fine. Then also a car that is very reliable. The design of the 968 it's a nice looking car. It's definitely more modern looking than a 944. It sort of looks like a 944, and from the profile it does, but there's enough changes to it that do make it significantly different looking than a 944. The front end has 928 inspired round pop-up headlights, and those are also similar design to the 993, basically. The whole front end was revised over the 944. It's a much smoother, sleeker shape. The door mirrors are these arrow mirrors instead of the flag mirrors that are on the 944s. And just overall has a good look to it. It's a very, very handsome car. I'm actually surprised driving it around how many looks I get in this thing. Definitely get a lot of double takes. It looks longer than a 944, and I think it is a couple inches longer. And the chassis, the wheelbase is the same, but visually it just looks a little bit lower and a little bit longer. And it's just the trick of the design, basically. At the rear, it has these integrated taillights. The original 944 and 924 taillights were kind of this cool, really chunky rectangular setup that they had at the back, which has its own, appeal as well. But these are much more 90s looking, the taillights on this car. They're integrated into the bumper cap at the rear and much smoother and sleeker. And all those things kind of add up to a really good looking car. This is a very, very good looking car. It's very rakish. It's basically the same interior that Porsche came out with in mid 85 to update the 944 interior. And if you are familiar with the early 944 interior, that definitely is a classic looking interior. It has its own charm, but you can definitely tell that it's a 70s interior, whereas the interior like this one that came out in 85 and a half, typical Porsche, it was very ahead of its time, and it's aged really well. It's a really good design. It's very, definitely looks 80s, but in a good way, like late 80s. I love the driving position is great. It's low down. The center console is, got a nice sweep to it. Little touches like that make it a nice interior. It's very comfortable on the freeway. It's quiet. You could drive this thing across the country. I mean, that's the thing about the 968. It's a really good grand touring car as well as a good driver's car. These Porsche 4-cylinders from this era, when you start them up at first, they feel kind of gruff and they're a little unrefined feeling at idle. And then as you rev them out, the balance shafts kind of come into play and the engine smooths out, and they make nice smooth power all the way to redline. Yeah, this is a very fun car to drive. It's very entertaining, even with the Tiptronic. And that is down to the chassis, and then just the engine. While it lacks, the sound of it is not the most exciting thing. It has a certain character to it that it's kind of playful, and it revs really willingly. And then that combined with this 50-50 weight balance and the rear-wheel drive makes it definitely a real driver's car. You can definitely carry some really good speed down back road, and it's just really entertaining and also really easy to drive fast. But it's really the handling that this car, where it really comes to life. I mean, it is really fun to drive. It's just so well balanced. So typical of a car from this era, it definitely rolls quite a bit, and it has squat and dive, so it moves around, but it feels very composed all the time. The softer suspension, this doesn't have the MO30 suspension, which is the sports suspension, and this softer stock suspension actually feels really good, and it's even better on a bumpy road because it doesn't skitter and move around at all. It just absorbs all the bumps. Steering is very direct and it's pretty light. Not quite as much feedback as like a 964 from the same era. It doesn't have that light kind of front end feeling, obviously, because the engine's over the front end. Lots of mechanical grip. And it's just a joy to string a couple of corners together. You can really feel the Vario cam coming into play at higher RPMs. And if you keep the revs up, it definitely makes good progress. Yeah, it handles really good. You can just really chuck it around. If you go into a really tight turn, the front end definitely tends to wash out a little bit. But if you're in a more of a medium speed sweeper and you turn in, the car just takes a nice, slightly, it's neutral to just kind of a little bit of oversteer, but not in a sliding kind of way. It just sort of the back end you just feel like kind of come out and stays really planted. These were the same brakes that were on the 944 Turbo, and so definitely those were really good brakes when it came out on the Turbo, and they're sufficient for this car as well. Thanks for watching, you guys. Give me a like if you liked the video, give me a comment, and we'll see you on the next video.